It is effing real and it is devastating. And today we're going to talk about it. I'm going to explain to you how it happens, why it happens. And when you understand the why and the how, you'll be able to understand how to come out of it. And now I know most of you are like rolling your eyes when you hear the word COVID at this point. We're kind of over it. But for those of you who are still suffering from long haul, long term COVID, however you want to call it, if you're already at the sentence, you know how hard it's been. And some docs believe you, some docs don't believe you, and you're walking around feeling like it's in your head and it's not. And even those who believe you basically say, just be patient. It's going to go away. There's no real answer. So today I'm going to give you the answers. But before I continue, when you leave your comments today, this is not going to be a place for politics. This is not a place for you to leave your comments at masks or vaccines or any of that. This is a place for those of you who are suffering, and only for those of you who are suffering or know someone who's suffering and really want to get answers. Today I'm going to break it down for you, tell you why long COVID happens, and then also tell you the steps that you can take to get yourself out of it and start feeling like your old self again. And today's talk is going to be technical, but that's okay because I know you, my listeners, you guys can handle it. You are the best listeners, the best audience in the world. And I know that you're going to actually appreciate we're going to get so technical. Put your comments here, ask your questions. Even if it's not about COVID, go ahead and ask them. We can handle it. So long COVID, let's talk about it. So let's first define what long-term COVID means. Long-term COVID means 4 to 6 weeks after your initial infection, you're still not feeling right. And I want to mention, it doesn't even matter if your initial symptoms were mild or moderate. Okay, so we're talking about it's about time after 4 to 6 weeks. And let's talk about what these long COVID patients are faced with. They're faced with a quick recap before I tell you that list. Let's just remind everybody that COVID enters right through the nose, into the lining of the nose, and then the virus replicates, and then it has a quick and easy access to the brain, to the lungs, and to the GI tract and the vessels. And that's important to note when we notice all these things it affects. So long haulers are going to feel fatigue, myalgia, fancy word for everything hurts, arthralgia, fancy word for my joints hurt, headache. You'll have long-term, some of you might have long-term effects in the brain. You might feel like there's new cognitive issues, meaning you might have problems with like word problems, ability to concentrate. People describe this as brain fog. In fact, they've done pre and post MRIs, pre and post COVID MRIs, and they show that some people have a loss of gray matter, and that affects the areas of the brain that have to do with taste and smell, spatial memory, understanding spaces, complex decision making, and of course, this can down the road lead to, if not treated, brain fog, dementia, and trigger Alzheimer's. Respiratory issues. Some long haulers are still short of breath, even though months have passed. They can't exercise it the way they used to. Cardiovascularly, you know that some of them have clots that they've never had before, or a cardiovascular event, some new heart issue, some blood flow issues. Some of them have new onset hypertension. They are suddenly diagnosed with high blood pressure. On a psychiatric level, some long haulers suddenly have anxiety or depression, or they had anxiety and depression and now it got worse. Sleep issues, PTSD even. People have kidney issues that they never had before. Their GFR, that's how we measure kidney, suddenly goes down 6 months later. Hair loss has been attributed to it. On an endocrine level, some people have either brand new diabetes or worsening diabetes, brand new Hashimoto's. Stomach wise, GI wise, we have brand new elevated liver enzymes, new stomach issues that you never had before. And people who have autoimmune issues will suddenly have a flare up or a brand new autoimmune that they've never had before. So if any of this list is like, yes, and you're raising your hand, yes, this is me. Oh my God, all of it is me, or one of it is me. First of all, you're not alone. I hear you. You're in the right place. You're not crazy. Please, I need you to take that for a moment. You're not crazy. This is real, and I'm going to explain to you why this happens. When you understand the why, I really think you're going to exhale and finally feel heard. So it all has to do with how the virus gets into the cell. As a brief reminder for those of you who may not know, a virus actually has to go inside a cell and use the machines in the cell to help replicate. Okay, so the virus goes in, and then there's all these machinery inside. I'm saying machines, but they're like organelles. There's machines that they use to help replicate. That's how viruses replicate. So they have to get inside the cell. COVID has 4 different ways that it gets inside the cell. And we're going to talk about one particular way that it gets in the cell, because this is the main reason why you're feeling how you're feeling. So the outside of every cell has a whole bunch of like proteins and enzymes coming out of it. One of these enzymes is called ACE2. ACE2 is the way that COVID binds to the cell. So it binds onto ACE2, and then it uses that as a doorway to get into the cell. Okay, who cares? Here's the problem. The problem is that ACE2 on a regular normal day when there's no COVID around has some really important jobs to do. And let me tell you some of the jobs. And when you start understanding what ACE2 does on a regular day, you're going to understand why you have your symptoms. So it protects your blood vessels, your heart, your brain, your lungs, your kidneys, your bone marrow. It inhibits inflammation. It prevents abnormal clotting, enables healing. And when COVID binds to it, it loses its ability to do all of that. ACE2 is such a super important enzyme. It works on, I'm going to say it again, the heart, the intestine, the kidneys, the testicles, the nasal passages, mucous membranes, lungs. Is it sounding familiar? On a regular day, ACE2 is in charge of managing heart, vessels, brain, lung, kidney, in charge of calming down inflammation, in charge of calming down clots. And now it's busy hosting COVID. Once COVID uses it, it cannot do its normal job. It's impaired from doing its normal job. ACE2 is suppressed. So all the complications of COVID can be traced back to ACE2 suppression, right? So they work on the lungs. You have lung issues. Inflammation. ACE2 is part of our first line defense of inflammation, but now it's busy. So that first line of defense, which tries to calm down some inflammation, is busy. And so we go into these great big inflammatory called cytokine storms because ACE2 is busy. ACE2 is busy, so we get clots. ACE2 is busy, so we get heart issues and vascular issues. It's busy, we get kidney issues. A lot of you might suffer from something called POTS, P-O-T-S, or dysautonomia. If you don't know what that is, that's okay. I'm speaking to those of you who have that diagnosis. This is a common feature of long COVID, again, because ACE2 is busy. GI issues. It actually reduces certain enzymes in the belly, so your microbiome is off. You'll be more likely to have fungal overgrowth. When ACE2 is busy, it impairs like this kind of flow between tryptophan and serotonin. A little bit too detailed here, but it actually causes depression. It messes with mood. And this also, as I said earlier, messes with gut bacteria and fungal issues in the belly. So ACE2, as you can see, because it is so important in so many parts in our everyday life, when now it's busy or damaged from COVID, it can no longer do the things that we needed to do on a daily basis. And this is why you're not feeling well. The second reason you're not feeling well is because ACE2, when it gets damaged or when it gets busy, it will produce mitochondrial damage. And for those of you who watched me last week, mitochondria are super important parts of our cell. They are basically how we get our energy for everything. And they are very sensitive. And when they get damaged, we do not feel well. By the way, I don't mean to be a conspiracy theorist. However, the reason no one talks about mitochondrial damage is because there's no medication for it. I'm going to show you how we're going to repair it, but there's no meds for it. This is kind of why it's not the conversation. So I'm just going to put it out there. And if you attack me, that's okay, but that's the reality. So the loss of ACE2 activity causes not only damage to all those organs I told you about, but also damage to the mitochondria. And the mitochondria is at the root of just about every disease. So you have these 2 big issues that no one is addressing and no one is fixing. And this is why you feel so unwell. But let's go on to recovery. So now we understand why it's happening. So how do we recover? So recovery has to do with 5 things. Optimizing lifestyle. I'm going to talk about each one of these. Enhancing ACE2 activity. Now you understand why. Repairing the mitochondria. Now you understand why. Repair organ damage and alleviating psychosocial distress. Alleviating psychosocial distress. This right here, this talk, this YouTube, this Facebook, I also did a TikTok on it, should already alleviate some of your psychosocial distress in that you are not crazy. This is real. We know on a molecular level why this is happening, and there is a way out. So if anything you get from this, it's the ability to exhale a little bit and understand that what you're feeling is so real. And I understand why it could be so debilitating. And let's talk about the rest of it. But I just want to take a moment that alleviating psychosocial distress is really important. All providers out there should be telling to their patients who are long haulers, it's okay. This is real. Let's fix it. As opposed to saying, come on, just get over it. Just be patient. It'll go away. Okay. Now that I addressed that, let's go to optimizing lifestyle. Optimizing lifestyle is crucial because if we don't optimize it, we're not going to optimize our ACE2 activities and enhance it, right? So I know I kind of say it all the time, but now I want you to understand it in the context of ACE2. You have to get sleep. You have to get sleep. You need a good sleep-wake cycle, a good eating schedule. If you're not sleeping, consider melatonin. Not only does it help with sleep, it's also anti-inflammatory. Graded exercise. Graded exercise means it's not a one size fits all. It is not okay to just say, go exercise. Everyone join a gym. Everyone go do a class. Graded exercise means you have to do exercise that is good for you, which might be different than your neighbor. The way you know is it's something that you can do every day without feeling that the next day you have to rest. So if you run a mile today and then tomorrow you can't exercise because you're exhausted, that's not the right exercise for you. You need to find something that you can do daily that doesn't wipe you out, that doesn't lead to a crash. This is super important. That is the right exercise. People ask me all the time, what should I do? That's the right exercise. If you do too much, if you need to rest after exercise, you're just increasing inflammation. Breathing therapy is important. And nutrition is important. Again, I know I talk about nutrition, but I want you to understand it from this perspective. An anti-inflammatory diet, a plant-based diet. Notice I didn't say the word vegan. I did not say you cannot have animal fat. And I purposely didn't say vegan because you can eat potato chips all day and call yourself a vegan. That's not what I mean. Okay? So I'm not saying vegan. I have plenty of vegans who eat rice all day long. That's not what I mean. I mean plant-based. That means I'm not having a conversation with you right now about whether you're getting your protein from animal or from another source. That's a different conversation. What I am saying is that in your nutrition, you must have a lot of plants and they must have a lot of color because you're going to see in a moment that these colors are actually ACE2 enhancing. Okay, so vegetables, fruits, herbs, spices, walnuts, nuts, all these things I need you to have in there. Plant-based, rich in omega-3. That is what you're looking for. Johns Hopkins did a study on 700 healthcare providers. And because they assumed that they were going to get COVID, they were able to study them before COVID and after COVID. And those who had a plant-based diet, who ate 40% more than the rest of the cohort, had a decrease of 72% reduced risk of having long-term issues just because of the vegetables. They didn't talk about exercise. They didn't talk about whether or not they eat meat. We're just talking about the vegetable portion, the plant-based portion. Sorry, not vegetables, the plant-based, the fact that it's rich in color and full of plants. So that brings us now, so we talked about optimizing lifestyle. Let's talk specifically about ACE2 enhancement. Okay. And I'm going to talk about supplements because now the supplements will make sense. Other times I talk about supplements for different reasons, anti-inflammatory. This time I'm talking about it for ACE2 activity. So Omega-3 enhances ACE2. They did a study on critically ill patients taking omega-3, which led to an 84% decline in mortality just with omega-3. Um, Curcumin or turmeric affects ACE2, reverses, if they did a study that reverses myocardial fibrosis. Doesn't matter if you don't know what that means. That's okay. Bottom line, they did a study on it and it helps. Resveratrol, ACE2, improves blood flow to the brain. They've had over 194 randomized controlled trials on resveratrol and showing its benefits ranging from, and the doses from 75 to 2,000 a day in the studies. But the point is, it's been studied. And if anyone tells you, there's no study behind it, incorrect. You can look it up. Vitamin D increases ACE2 tissue levels and decreases inflammation. Alpha lipoic acid, ALA, preserves ACE2 in the brain, reduces hypertension. Again, 233 randomized control trials just on this supplement alone. So far we talked about some supplements that can help with ACE2. Here's something interesting that my listeners, my patients will I think appreciate. And if you're not yet one of our game changers, welcome. Welcome to the vortex. It just keeps going deeper and deeper. Anyway, here's what's interesting. Cortisol activates ACE2. Cortisol activates, just a reminder, we want to activate ACE2. Cortisol activates ACE2. Cortisol is produced naturally by your adrenals. It's something our body produces naturally. But for those of you who have adrenal fatigue, guess what? You're not producing enough cortisol for this ACE2. So maybe you had adrenal fatigue before you had COVID. And if you don't know what adrenal fatigue is, check out one of my episodes on adrenal fatigue. So you had adrenal fatigue before getting COVID. Now you have COVID. Now your body really, really, really needs its cortisol levels. And guess what? You can't give it to them because you are not producing enough. So now you're stuck in a loop. Your body needs it. You can't give it. And now you're feeling worse and worse and worse. So it's another component of this. Here's another component for my postmenopausal women. Estrogen is an important player. And that's why most of the people with long COVID, most, not all, are over 50 and female. Because when estrogen goes down, it is a player in this ACE2 conversation. So it's important that your hormones are balanced. So if you're considering bioidentical hormone replacement therapy, consider it because this is another part of ACE2. It's all these different parts. And hopefully your mind is blown because my mind was blown when I did the research. So we talked about optimizing lifestyle. We talked about ACE2 enhancement. Now we have to talk about rescuing the mitochondria. Okay, rescuing the mitochondria. So ACE2 also affects the mitochondria. We talked about this last week also. I also did a TikTok on it. Find it. I get really deep into it. But here's what you need to remember. Oxidative stress is what causes havoc to the mitochondria. That's when there's a single electron floating around. And when it does that, it just creates a mess. It's called oxidative stress. And that damages the mitochondria. So when ACE2 is suppressed, it creates this oxidative stress, which hurts the mitochondria. And that impacts every organ. That's what you need to know. Impacts every organ. And when your mitochondria is down, you have exertional fatigue, means you get winded when you're doing basic things. You're cleaning your house and you're tired. Cognitive dysfunction, having trouble to concentrate. I remember my wife, after she had COVID, it was really hard for her to get through a full day of her basic work. It took a few days for her to get out of that. So know that that's real. You're not making that up. Dyspnea, meaning shortness of breath. Like it's been weeks and you still can't catch your breath when you're doing exercise. Any clotting issues, again, is a mitochondrial issue. People who are suffering with fibromyalgia, I did an episode on that. Chronic fatigue syndrome. That's really a mitochondrial issue. And your central nervous system is super sensitive to mitochondria. So it's critical that we fix it. So how do we fix it? Obviously the lifestyle, obviously everything we've talked about so far. But then there are supplements that are specific to mitochondria. Remember, there's no medication for this. This is why nobody's talking about it. There's no medication for this. It's supplements. So here are the supplements. And each one of these supplements have hundreds of randomized controlled trials done on them. So feel free to look them up. Here are the supplements. I'm going to list them right here for you. Okay. NAD, ubiquinone helps inflammation, helps cardiac muscle. CoQ10 reduces inflammation and reduces thrombotic markers, meaning clotting factors, clotting markers. Carnitine, B1, B2, B3, vitamin E, something called PQQ, which has a really long name that I can't pronounce, but guess what? It's found in spinach, green peppers, kiwi, tofu, natto, and asparagus, green tea, and all of that helps the mitochondria. Remember, plant-based? This is what I'm talking about. Glutathione protects the mitochondria. I want to caution you about vitamin C. There is a trend of just like putting in a lot of vitamin C. There is a little bit of a controversy that too much vitamin C can actually impair mitochondrial repair after exercise. So we don't have to like overload vitamin C. I mean, there are times when we need to overload it for specific reasons, but for mitochondrial repair, we don't need to go max out. Just take enough. All right. So then the next thing we have to talk about is repairing organ damage. We talked about optimizing lifestyle, supplements for ACE2 enhancement, supplements to rescue the mitochondria, but there might be some organs that were affected by COVID. Let me tell you what I mean. So you've restored all these things, but let's talk a moment about the brain, like brain fog. Let's talk a minute about why brain fog is such a big deal. Sorry, before I do that, other things that could be damaged long term from this, you might have a thyroid issue that you never had before. So you have to correct the thyroid, right? You might have new leaky gut, new GI issues. So even though you're correcting all these things, you have to fix that. You might have a new onset autoimmune issue. We have to fix that. Adrenal fatigue. So we need to fix those organs that have now been altered as a result. And now specifically about brain fog. So what happens to the brain during COVID is a little bit different than the rest of the body. The rest of the body is really dealing with an infection. What happens to the brain is that it actually has death of neurons. So it causes neuronal damage. It also causes what we call vascular injury, meaning the vessels are a little bit injured. And then there's inflammation. So we have neurons that are damaged, vessels that are damaged, and inflammation that's damaged. And it has to do less with how much of the virus is in there, which is why, even though some of us, the virus is gone, we feel better, but we still have this because the neurons and the vessels are damaged and there's also inflammation. So it's a little bit of a different conversation, what's happening here, than the rest of the body. So now we have to talk about supplements that are specific to the COVID brain because we want to restore the lining, something called endothelium. We want to reduce inflammation. We want to improve mitochondria. We want to stimulate neuroplasticity. That could be its own episode, but it's basically the brain's ability to adapt. And we want to restore the neurons and neurotransmitters. So we're back to omega-3. Omega-3 helps regenerate neurons. It helps the post-COVID brain issues. It also helps the injury to the vessels that we talk about, enhances ACE2, decreases inflammation, and improves mitochondrial function. All in one supplement, omega-3. Omega-3 plus alpha-lipoic acid takes it to the next level and actually stimulates neuroplasticity. Another supplement that you may not have heard of is called vinpocetine. It enhances neuroplasticity, reduces inflammation, helps with memory. Remember, the Western diet is not going to help you out here. You need to change your diet first because I'm going to tell you 3 things that help the brain. They sound fancy, but they're actually found in food. Fisetin, which is found in strawberries. Luteolin, which is what makes plants yellow. And resveratrol, which is in grapes, blueberries, raspberries. So you can go and get those supplements, or you could just eat the plant-based diet that I keep telling you about to stimulate neuroplasticity. There's also something called BDNF. I know I'm giving you so much, but I feel like I need to rescue so many of you. So bear with me and just, watch me on 2-speed if you're on YouTube, but make sure you get this info. BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, has to do with neuroplasticity. Guess what? COVID brings it down. Walking increases it. Fixing your microbiome increases it. Fixing your gut, walking around, all of it increases it. And of course, I already talked about omega. And another word about gut microbiome, because we talked about the organs. We talked about fix the thyroid, fix the adrenals, fix your brain. Let's talk quickly about the gut microbiome. COVID will also decrease the bacterial diversity in your belly. If you don't know what a microbiome is, watch one of my other episodes, but just know COVID messed with your belly. So it decreased your bacterial diversity. It increased pro-inflammatory species, and it decreased a lot of the really important bacteria that you need. There is a very specific probiotic out there called Tundrex, Tundrex, which is specifically designed to help the post-COVID microbiome. See if you can get it. It's available online. So I think we covered all of it. And I know I spoke fast, but there was so much. I did hours and hours of research to get this down to as short as possible to give it to you. So here's the bottom line. Let's recap this. Long COVID is real. It is so real. And if you're feeling it, I'm sorry, but there is a way out. Which you need to understand that it's all about ACE2 suppression, all about mitochondrial damage. And I gave you everything you need to help you climb out of this, repair your ACE2, repair your mitochondria, repair your brain fog, repair your belly. I know it was so much information, but this is such a critical thing that many of my patients talk about. As always, if you want to work with me and my team, you just go on the new method anywhere except for Twitter because I talk too much. Send us a message. If you want to do a consult with us, there's always a link in all these places. At the end of the day, we just want to help you get you feeling better, empowering you to know that it's not in your head because you always knew there was a better way. I will talk to you guys next week.